Episode number 343. Today's topic is Show Me the Total Cache. And this episode of WP Watercooler is brought to you by ServerPress, makers of desktop server.
Where's the banner? There you go.
Right there. ServerPress, makers of desktop server. I want to say thank you very much for ServerPress for helping us out. We really appreciate it. You can go over to their website over at serverpress.com. Let's go around the room real quick and get everyone introduced. Cosper, how about you? Start us off.
Well, hey, everybody. I'm Jason Cosper, a.k.a. Fat Mullenweg, and we're going to be talking about the state of the word today. Oh, no, wait. That's tomorrow.
How about you, Manny?
Hey, guys. I'm Manny. I'm a web developer based here in Vegas, and I'm freezing. Had to unpack all my winter clothes, and glad to be here.
Good to have you on, Manny. I'm Jason Tucker. You can find me over at Jason Tucker on Twitter. My website is jasontucker.blog, and I do this show as well as another show called WP Blab. And tomorrow we're actually doing our Mystery Science Theater 3000 style interpretation of Stay the Word. So we're gonna have a lot of fun with that. Bridget and I are gonna have a few drinks, hang out, and she actually doesn't even go to the event. She sits in her hotel room, and then her and I just kind of watch the video play out, and we just have some fun and kind of talk about the things.
What time is it tomorrow?
I believe it's at 2:00 if I remember correctly, Pacific.
Okay.
If I remember correctly, it's on my calendar that way, so hopefully that is it. I do want to let you know that if you're watching on any of the various social media places that we push this out to, if you want, you could be just like JD, and you can have JD went and said, kicking off the weekend. So feel free to go and leave your comments in there. We'd love to throw them up on the screen and even talk about them and interact with them and stuff. And I just want to kind of jump in a little bit here, and we're going to be talking about BoldGrid's acquisition of W3 Total Cache today, as well as other things that have been going on within the WordPress space, acquisition-wise, and so on and so forth. So let's jump in a little bit. So where did we end up finding this one, Cosper?
Actually, I ended up seeing it on WP Tavern. Announced the news just recently, and I think it's really interesting, especially since W3 Total Cache is one of those plugins that's been out there for quite some time. It's one of the most popular WordPress plugins. So an acquisition of a plugin so large is kind of a big deal. But especially, I mean, it's a plugin so large, but it's also a plugin with a lot of baggage over the years. There's been, concerns just even, 2 or 3 years ago, where people were worried that W3 Total Cache was abandoned. It wasn't seeing the updates that it should have been. It wasn't, getting a lot of support that people were expecting, things like that. I mean, I'm glad that they basically have someone to kind of shepherd it along and keep pushing it forward, especially for those million plus people who depend on it every day. But at the same time, I have, for friends and things like that, I've had to evaluate caching plugins, and the last time I looked, the kind of the top tier of the space, we have, the premium, there's WP Rocket, and then there's also KeyCDN makes one called Cache Enabler that works outstandingly and does not have a lot of options to configure and everything else. I mean, if we're talking about W3 Total Cache, that's options is nothing that they've ever shied away from.
It's the Optionsaurus Rex, if you ask me. There's a lot of options there.
And in working in support and hosting support, specifically over the past, not lately, but just over the past 13, 14 years that I've been working with WordPress now, you run into a lot of people who will grab a copy of W3 Total Cache, and sometimes in shared hosting and things like that go, oh, hey, I'll turn Memcache support on or whatever, even though their host doesn't even have Memcache. or Redis support, and it just kind of lets you turn that stuff on and doesn't say, hey, wait a minute, I'm not finding a Redis server here. Like, what's going on? So there are definite things for BoldGrid to improve, and I think user experience is one of those things.
Yeah, it's interesting to see that that we're getting these companies, especially when it comes to WordPress hosting companies, are starting to work their way more and more into the dashboard, and that they're either redesigning the dashboard entirely. They're taking parts of the dashboard and maybe having like a splash page at the very beginning that says, here's all the things you can install. It could be as simple as just like a logo up in the corner of the screen that's saying, hey, we haven't seen what BoldGrid's going to do with this just yet, but there very well could be, BoldGrid showing up on a site that's hosted over at DreamHost, or a BoldGrid logo that's showing up that's being hosted at, whoever else, whatever other hosting company. And so it makes you think, like, at some point, is the play to get people to switch to that, to that provider, to, switch over to that web host, because the fact that caching plugin is doing such a good job for them that they feel maybe they should go into that space? Or is it along the lines of, now that you're hosting with BoldGrid, we'll just automatically install and pre-configure all of those, menagerie of buttons and such into a point where it works really well for their web hosting environment? What do you guys think? Like, which way do you think that there is a play for this? Is it to use it as a way of advertising, or do you feel that it's maybe, yes, you are using it, and here's the plugin that you're using on the same web host?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, first of all, I think there is a trending of people thinking more about page speed. If you see like newbies and people that are not aware of this before, they now are paying attention to this, that it's important. It's more important not only for the user experience, but also because it's one of the SEO factors, right? Mm-hmm. So yeah, there is a lot of people. I've seen a lot of people now here's my score on GT metrics, and can you help me understand this? And I think like what BoldGrid does is they are a page editor, right? They have their main product is a page editor, or is it the hosting?
No, it's hosting. That's hosting.
Mm-hmm. Hosting with a page editor, right? They have a page editor built in. Yeah. So I guess, yes, they want to perhaps give an option for the newcomers to not have to worry about that, page speed. That's what I think.
And I do think that there is that bit of soft advertising. I know that WP Engine has their PHP compatibility checker that as people were pushing from getting off of like the 5.6 and et cetera branches and going, oh, can I even upgrade to 7? Can I upgrade to 7.1, 7.2? So they've had that little, and it's become a very popular plugin over the years. So I know that they have a little bit of soft advertisement there. I know that there's a plugin, my day job, I don't talk about it much here, but my day job is I work over at Liquid Web. We actually leverage a competitor's Redis plugin in our stack, the Pantheon Redis plugin. And they don't put a big, when you activate the plugin, they don't put a big, powered by Pantheon or anything like that in there.
I use that one too.
Right.
So the engine, and mobile.
Yeah, and it's really easy and simple and works and does what it says it's going to do. Daniel Bach-Huber, who developed that plugin, along with the other folks over at Pantheon, have done a great job with it. But they don't advertise it, except for, I believe, in just the repository where you see the Pantheon like branding on their banner and stuff like that, but otherwise, and just that little developed by, like, when you're looking at the plugin thing, but so there are a few levels that they can go here with how they want to advertise it. Do they want to go sorry Yoast, but full Yoast, and have like a ginormous banner at the top of things when you activate it, or do they want to go a little softer like Pantheon and just say like, hey, this is, this is a nice plugin. Like, we give this to the community, like not necessarily expecting any additional. I mean, you would think that they would want to get some of the recognition from doing this. And I'm curious, I didn't actually get all the way through. I think I got distracted, but with the article, my ADD was highly, today. But did they say how much that they're buying Total Cash for?
I don't think so.
No, I don't think so.
They didn't give disclosure.
So, I mean, who knows how much they acquired it for? I would say a plugin with 1 million installs across a bunch of different hosts, like that is something. And I know Frederick Towns from W3 Total Cash has worked in the startup space. He used to be the CTO of Mashable. His LinkedIn or something like that says that he's working at a, what is it, like real estate company, Jason? Is that what we found out?
Like an online real estate software company. Yeah.
Right. So like he has some idea of startups and, the value of, what his plugin is pulling in. He sees how much that they're selling in the premium support that they've been selling the past few years, stuff like that. So I'm sure it wasn't just a, drop in the bucket sort of thing, sort of investment for them.
Right.
But it's definitely.
I wanted to circle back around a little bit from what you were saying before about plugins that tend to put, you said go full Yoast, which cracked me up, and it actually cracked up JD, who's watching on YouTube as well. But that idea that this plugin's one of those plugins that you kind of set it and you forget it. And that Redis plugin that you're talking about from Pantheon, same thing. You set it and you forget it. It's not like you're logging into your dashboard. The first thing you do is you go, how's my Redis service going? And you go log in there and start playing around with it. Like, that's not how that works. So
right.
the idea of having a plugin that's essentially just running in the background, it's very utility. It just sits there and it does its thing and you never touch it ever again. I kind of hope that thing isn't going to sit there and start telling me a bunch of stuff like, hey, you should do this. Hey, you should do that. It's like, like your plugin's just sitting back there making cache files, serving up those cached files, and that's it. Like, you shouldn't be. It's doing a lot of work, but really, like, for the end user or the user that's the editor or whoever that's going to be writing for that blog, they really should not be having to interact with your plugin at all. Hopefully, ever, because there's no real good reason to be making any changes in there.
Absolutely. And I mean, this is the first acquisition by BoldGrid, so at least that I'm aware of. So we don't know how they handle their branding, etc. Like post acquisition will be something definitely to watch. Hopefully they decide to just kind of keep things out of the way. Yeah.
I hope so. And when it comes to plugins like these, there are reasons to have some type of banner that pops up or some type of something that pops up to let you know that something's changed. But I think after that, it should never have to really. It should tell you like, hey, just let you know BoldGrids now owns this or whatever. I don't even know if that is even important. Especially like one of my users wouldn't care less. Like they don't care that there's a word cap that's going on right now, and there's a bunch of people showing up in some city, in the US. They don't care about that. Right. So for the users themselves, the users really don't care, and they don't care who bought what or whatever. They just want to make sure that it works and continues to work.
I wouldn't have a problem if they said, hey, we bought this and we've made user interface improvements. We've made improvements so whether or not you have to turn Redis on, whether or not you have to like it'll auto detect things for you. It'll give you like, if they put a little more WP Rocket style like polish on it, if they make that investment there and kind of improve that user experience, like, crow about that. Like actually tell people like, hey, you set it and forget it, but take a look. There's maybe a couple things you can do to make your site even faster now. I wouldn't mind that.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind that either.
I'm sure that there would be a handful of people in the support forums who are just like, I never want to see a notification ever. Like, why is this happening? But most folks would be like, oh, okay, it looks nicer and it's easier to work with. Like, yeah, okay, I'll take a look at my settings and spend, 20 minutes in there, like trying to tune things up a little bit. Why not?
Yeah, and I mean, even BoldGrid's editor, I've never actually used BoldGrid's editor before, so I'm kind of looking on their website to kind of see how this is set up. Their page editor has enough of a design to it that they could apply that design to, Total Cache and actually make it look like a pretty nice and pretty clean interface for it. Right now, it looks just like any other dashboard type interface where it's just using all the basic styles and all the basic everything. But
Right.
yeah, they could definitely add some to it to kind of make it look a little better and have it maybe have a bit of that, like you're saying, functionality check there where it's like, I don't detect a Redis server, but do you have one? And what's the address and what's the host you're using for it? Are you using this? Does this have this? Just kind of ask those extra questions.
Right.
Memcache and all that fun stuff.
And of course, because of, BoldGrid and the integration there, if they're like, oh, you're on BoldGrid, like I've got that set up for you. You don't even have to answer this question. Like that would be a great place to see this go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, because they've already kind of tested out how everything needs to be set up and essentially hide a lot of those switches that don't necessarily need to be displayed when it says, hey, we detected you're on BoldGrid here. Here's the 4 things you can switch, and all the rest of them we've already figured out, and you're good to go.
Yeah. How I mean, none of us can speak for them, but how would you feel right now if you were WP Rocket and you just saw this massive investment into, caching and potentially a premium caching plugin in, or something that you can convert into a premium service? How would you feel? Would you feel like that's a validation of what you've been doing with WP Rocket, or would you feel threatened by it a little bit? Like, would you, oh crap, we're going to have to start amping up our marketing budget. We're going to have to start, because WP Rocket, like, they've mostly gone on word of mouth so far, right? Like, I'm not really running into a lot. I mean, I run an ad blocker, so I wouldn't be running into ads anyway. But I'm not running into a ton of ads for WP Rocket around. Like,
no, and I remember WP Rocket being, one of the plugins that you could actually use on WP Engine as a caching plugin, and having some of those pieces. I'd imagine not everything was enabled or whatever. There's probably a little bit of kind of leeway between the two, or a special type of setting that was enabled to allow it. But WP Rocket's great product, and they have some great people that are working behind it. I mean, I'm looking at the screen here, and I can recognize 3 faces that I know from their team at the bottom of their site. And so those folks over there are great folks. Their plugin is a premium plugin that looks really, really nice and works really well.
Solid.
Yeah, it's a solid plugin. So,
but you've gotten an investment from like effectively the 800-pound gorilla of caching plugins.
Right. I think for that you need to be, if you're WP Rocket or any of the other ones, you need to get better partnerships in place. Like, just looking at WP Rocket's partnerships here that they have with folks, they work with Beaver Builder, they work with CoSchedule, they work with Codable, Main WP. Like, they've already kind of have started to establish these things. What's tricky or interesting when you're in a space like this, especially if you're a web host, is unless you're somebody who has multiple web host brands under the same umbrella, you can't really go to another web host and be like, hey, we're BoldGrid. We have this plugin that we acquired. We would love to partner with one of our competitors to have this product show up. So you're kind of stuck with that. Where with WP Rocket, they can be with anybody, and they can work with anybody, and they can put all of those brands on there and be able to kind of work that way. And not everyone hosts with BoldGrid.
Yeah, and I will say that there was a pretty big streak of reluctance to even when I was looking at the Redis plugins. That I mean, there's just a small handful available. The fact that the Pantheon one that we settled on was from a competitor. It was like, hey, do we want to give even this little developed by credit to a competitor? Like, do we want to say, like, yeah, we're running, but like, honestly, that's part of the beauty of open source software. You run something that was written by a competitor, and we're, you know, a rising tide, you know, that whole saying. Yeah. So
well, you can also be a competitor of your upstream. So like if you're somebody who hosts, if you're a web host company and you're using Amazon, and Amazon, you're using their servers to host your stuff, you could also use Amazon and not use anybody and still host your stuff. Like, you know, you have that kind of thing as well. I mean, if Amazon got in the business of hosting WordPress, okay, then that kind of adds the whole thing all together. They're like, oh yeah, one-click Amazon install or one-click WordPress install on Amazon. That would be a very interesting thing. But yeah, I mean, I don't see any problem with that. I mean, there's plenty of competitors that have used one another's things. I'd imagine in the Linux space, just in general, that you could have a particular project that maybe like Red Hat made that now some other distributions now using as well, like that sort of thing. So, you know.
Yeah. One thing that we didn't talk yet is also like the upsell, right? Part of this, because they probably can make money out of the CDN aspect of this too, right? The partnership with someone, Max CDN or someone.
Absolutely.
And probably a lot of money there too, you know, the upsells that a caching plugin could, you know, bring to the table. I don't know if they have. I'm looking here if they do have. I think they do offer CDN from multiple sources, right? Or is it just from one specific one?
Yeah, it looks like. I mean, I've never hosted with BoltGrid, so I'm having to do a little bit of research on the fly here.
W3 Total Cache, they offer like a bunch of CDNs, right, that you can connect.
Right. You should be able to plug in any CDN that as long as it supports like a pretty standard set of. Yeah.
Sorry, my dog was making some noise here.
No problem. I think Jason and I are fully familiar with dogs making noise.
My work
definitely.
Number 2.
Yeah, I get what you're saying with that, and it might even be an opportunity for them to because like I was saying, in order for if you're a web host and you acquire something like this, you've essentially just blocked out all the rest of the web hosts as partners that you could do, because that's just how it works. But with the CDN, on the other hand, not all web hosts are CDNs, nor do they provide CDN service. And most of the time, you should probably go going with another company anyhow as a CDN. So yeah, if they were to go and partner up with another company as a CDN provider and say, hey, you know, you could tie into this, I could see that being something that works.
And also image optimization too, right? There are a lot of companies like optimizing image for your website and stuff like that, like Kraken and Sharp Pixel and all those.
Why didn't we buy this? I don't understand. I mean, we're coming up with all the great ideas.
Yeah. Or they should just hire us to come up with good ideas.
Right. Exactly.
I mean, for me, it would be a conflict of interest, but for Jason and Manny, it would. Yeah.
So what about JD was asking about in the chat here about Supercache and how Automatic owns Supercache, and when that kind of came to be, we haven't seen much of Automatic using Supercache as a way to advertise other things.
No.
So,
well, I mean, initially Supercache was developed, I believe, by at the time an Automatic employee, and that was like one of the
slid in.
Yeah. So I want to say Donica did it. I'm mispronouncing that name. It's Irish, and my.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm. I know what you're talking about here.
Yeah, and so I mean, he worked on Supercache for forever. I think Automatic took it over at some point, and he might still be working on it. I'm not too sure. I haven't had to evaluate caching plugins for a while, and know all the little. I mean, honestly, since the advent of managed hosting, a lot of these caching plugins are less and less relevant because, server-side caching of, the managed hosts like WP Engine, like Liquid Web, that rely on Nginx caching and, that rely on Varnish and things like that. Kinsta, Pantheon, Pagely, all of them don't really lay or lean on these caching plugins at all. So really, this shot is something at the lower to maybe even like low mid end of the market. So I think it's a shrewd one to put out there. If you're a host like Bullgrid that focuses kind of on that mid tier of the market, and really wants people to like a beginner to mid tier of the market, and you want to get people using your services to be able to have that little bit to say, kind of like you said at the beginning, Jason, like, hey, look at the job we do here, like caching stuff on your servers, like how think of how it'll be on our servers, like
right. And I think that's the difference between if you have a premium plugin versus a free plugin or even a freemium plugin, is that once you get into that premium plugin side of it, you can do whatever you want in your plugin. But when it comes to being a free plugin in the repository, in the plugins repository, that there's certain things you need to do in there, and that you're not allowed to start hitting people up for money for all sorts of things, especially when it comes to web hosting or whatever else. If we could spend like the last couple minutes here, what other you have all these people that are at WordCamp US right now, and they all have handfuls of money, and they're all walking around wanting to buy one another. What other things are there out there that they should be looking at? Is it forms? Is it like what other plugins are there that they should be looking at picking up?
I don't think the next place that people should be looking is plugins. I think that GoDaddy made a really shrewd acquisition with Sakuri, as far as like a security service goes. But the Sakuri has also in their offerings that WAF that sits in front of sites, and compared to Cloudflare, like I love the Sakuri guys, but like their offering isn't quite as there as Cloudflare is. But I love that it's an alternative to have like that sort of edge WAF at everything. I also think that like Manny said when he mentioned the partnership with CDNs, like a CDN, like it's one of the things that I see so many customers request, things like that, like people not even realizing that they can make their sites faster by pushing stuff off onto a CDN. So I feel like we might see managed hosts go into the CDN space. I think Automatic is killing it right now with their Photon component of Jetpack. It is one of the main reasons that I will actually recommend Jetpack to somebody is because of Photon. It's because of the optimization that Photon puts in place. Like it'll serve up WebP images that are much smaller to Chrome users, to browsers that support WebP. And now that Microsoft has the Edge browser written in Chrome and using like the Chromium engine for that, like Blink, it's I mean more and more people are going to be able to get WebP images. I don't believe in browser monoculture, but at the very least, there's some benefits there, and I think that examining, that and the CDN space, the WAF space is really where
Yeah.
where a
Well,
host should be looking next.
That's an interesting one, especially when it comes to having these plugins that we were just talking about today with caching and such. Those are places where you can definitely pull in those partnerships and start making things happen. So thank you very much for all of you folks for hanging out. Go over to our website at WPwatercooler.com/subscribe. Sorry, Manny. I got to make that thing a little bit smaller. But go over to WPwatercooler.com/subscribe. There you go. And I'll talk to y'all later. You have a good one over at WordCamp US. Bye-bye.